I remember as a kid, one of the first games that visually stunned me was when my brother showed me the original Far Cry. It was visually beautiful, it was a first-person shooter, and all I wanted to do was play more and more. As the years went by, we got more entries to the Far Cry franchise, some introducing the Far Cry trope of fantastic villains, and we even got a surprise game that blew our socks off with Far Cry Blood Dragon. Well, now we've got a new Far Cry game that not only is yes visually stunning, and yes fun to play, but in my opinion, it has the best villain of the series. If you've never played a Far Cry game before, don't let the number 6 throw you off. Each entry in the series is separate and it doesn't really have any story continuation. Well, except for Far Cry 5 and Far Cry New Dawn. Anyways, if you've never played one before, you can easily jump straight into 6 because each game is set in a different area with different characters and weapons and such. Far Cry 6 is based in the fictional island of Yara, a country that is in the heart of the Caribbean which has been frozen in time for 47 years. This basically means they haven't got the greatest technology, so don't expect to see Teslas driving around. The island of Yara has, as the game puts it, collapsed into poverty, and the president is trying to restore the Paradise Islands of Yara, who, if you can't tell, is played by Giancarlo Esposito, Gus from Breaking Bad or Moff Gideon from Star Wars The Mandalorian. The president, Anton Castillo, is a dictator and as well an evil dude, having his troops round up civilians, putting them to work, killing them in the streets, basically evil shit, all while at the same time trying to teach his son Diego about what Yara needs and how people need to be led. There are some pretty fucked up scenes here in Far Cry 6, but the acting on display, shit dude. Anyways, being a Far Cry game, and basically just like every Far Cry game before, you'll need to overthrow the president and free Yara from his rule. Now, unlike Far Cry 5 where you made your own character, here in Far Cry 6 you don't create a character, but you're also not necessarily locked into a character too. In Far Cry 3, 4 and such you played as a character, but here in 6 you play as Danny Rojas, who can be either male or female, and yes, your character is voiced. However, difference here though that with previous Far Cry games, all cutscenes took place in first person, where here we've got them in third person where we can see the character of Danny react to situations. Now just like in Far Cry 5, you'll be able to customize and equip Danny with different clothing and gear, but rather than them just being cosmetic like they are in previous games, gear in Far Cry 6 has perks and abilities. Some gloves allow Danny to put out fire immediately if he or she catches fire, some pants or shoes increase stamina recovery, and gas masks made out of bottles allow Danny to not be affected by poison gas. Core gameplay wise though, if you've played a Far Cry game before, well, the formula hasn't changed at all and nor should it really need to. You'll need to take out the president, Gus Fring, and in order to do that, you'll need to take out some of his key figures and lieutenants and also recruit others to your cause. If you've played Far Cry 5, it's basically the same, like how you need to take out Jacob Seed's brothers and sisters in order to take him out. You'll have checkpoints that you can take over a bit like the outposts from previous games. Not only should you take over these checkpoints so you can easily fast travel around, but if you decide to just leave it alone and drive through the checkpoints, tire poppers will deploy and then you'll find your way inside combat and you'll need to do it either way. But that's not all. As you'd expect, the land of Yara itself is massive, but thankfully not too large or daunting. Now I personally found Assassin's Creed Valhalla huge in scale. Now maps like this can either be exciting for players to get out there and explore everything, or turn some players off because they can see how much time you're going to need to sink into this game. Yara though, thankfully, is pretty great in regards to its size but also its variety. You get a taste of what's awaiting for you at the end of the game during the start prologue, but before setting out to beautiful beaches and deep lush jungles and going into a sewer system, and yes, there's even a gator farm. Now you've got access to standard weapons like AKs, revolvers, and if you got the special edition you'll have access to Far Cry Blood Dragon's weapons like basically Robocop's silenced auto pistol and a sniper. However, there are makeshift weapons that the group of rebels known as Libertad have created. We've got a crossbow that fires harpoons, which is insane as you think it is, a standard flamethrower, a hyper-powered nail gun that works like a silent weapon, a bit like the same sort of weapon from Deathloop, and then we've got a gun that fires CDs out at enemies, basically turning you into that Cenobite from Hellraiser 3. Then there's also the Supremo system. These are specialised, weaponised backpacks that require time to charge up, and work a little bit like the ultimate abilities in games like Overwatch. Now, depending on what Supremo you have equipped depends on what your ability is. There's one that sets out a healing stim gas that heals and revives all allies around you. There's an EMP backpack that does exactly what you think it does. A Supremo that fires rockets from its back, or my personal favourite, a Supremo that basically turns you into Hank Hill's wet dream. You've got propane tanks strapped to your back and you'll set a wave of fire out in all directions. Now Far Cry is known for its fire mechanics because of how it spreads across grassland and also how beautiful it is. With standard weapons too, you'll find resources like gunpowder, metal, gasoline, jars of mayonnaise, you know, the standard stuff. And from here you can use that to upgrade your weapons by adding attachments to them like sights and lasers and silencers and all that sort of stuff. But there's not just standard ones. There's one red dot sight that is a laser pointer bouncing off a single piece of glass, a silencer that's using an old plastic bottle, a laser pointer that's actually just a laser pointer taped to the gun. Yes, you'll be able to get this standard traditional style attachment, but Rebel geniuses have used milk bottles and crates to actually create a silencer, and it's fucking awesome. Now in Far Cry as well, it's worth noting that silencers can overheat. If you've got a Rebel bottle silencer, after a handful of rounds the silencer will start to catch fire, and if you continue to shoot, your gun will start to go loud as the silencer isn't working, so you need to take breaks in between firing to let your silencer cool down. Now Far Cry isn't Far Cry without companions, or here in Far Cry 6, amigos. Now unlike previous Far Cry titles, all companions here are animals. Well, unless you're playing with a friend.
Boomer took the front seat, look!
There are 3 major ones here in Far Cry 6. The first one is Guapo, a gator in a shirt and is a combat amigo, going in and charging at enemies, and in some instances Guapo will grab an enemy by the head and thrash them around. Secondly, we've got Chorizo. Now if you've seen anything to do with Far Cry 6, you've probably seen this guy. He is a puppy sausage dog who is in a doggy wheelchair with tools attached to him.
Look what he did to my best friend! What?
Now this adorable little guy surprisingly comes in handy and he'll do exactly what you expect him to do. He'll distract enemies. In combat as well, I've found him latched onto an enemy's arm, and if seeing a goon slap Chorizo around doesn't turn you into Arnold Schwarzenegger on a warpath, then you need some professional help.
Now you thank me?
The final main companion for Far Cry 6 is Chorizo, a bloodthirsty chicken that will yes fight alongside you, but I've never felt so much anger and distrust from a damn companion before. I felt like I actually needed to keep an eye on this bird in case they turn on me, and Guapo's a fucking gator. Funnily enough too, he's a companion that you can't pet because he'll just attack you.
Chicharrón, bad bird.
The recruitment mission for Chorizo 2 is awesome because the music is fucking fantastic. That's another point with Far Cry games. Now since Far Cry 3 we had Skrillex play while we burnt down a marijuana field, and while it was some interesting music for the series, we've got some more music here. Now interesting in a good way or bad way, that's up to you because music is a personal taste. But I called the Libertad to deliver me my ride and I heard Ricky Martin blasting from the speakers and I instantly laughed because this song fucks.
Here she is. And you can't even see the bullet holes.
Gracias.
Just like we had in Far Cry 3, 4, 5, and yes here in 6, there are missions that are based around lighting shit on fire while music plays. And the music that plays here in Far Cry 6 isn't as in your face as Skrillex, and it works perfectly for the setting of Yara. Graphically, Far Cry is beautiful. The lighting here with the dense jungle is fantastic. Giancarlo Esposito's character of Anton Castillo is absolutely fan-fucking-tastic and is by far my favourite villain from a Far Cry game. More so than Vaas. Anton is like Negan from The Walking Dead. Once he hits the screen, you can't take your eyes away from him. And Giancarlo's performance here radiates Gus Fring from Breaking Bad, with the happy tones immediately followed by a serious stoned face and fear.
You killed my son's last bird. Run.
What?
Run.
Every time I see him, whether it's here in Far Cry 6 or rewatching Breaking Bad or seeing Moff Gideon in The Mandalorian, it sends excitement and shivers at the same time down my spine. Now Far Cry 6, just like 5, can be tackled in basically any way you want. With the world of Yara, you'll start as Danny at a lower level, and to progress you need to not only take out key players in Gus Fring's operation, but you also need to go into more dangerous territory. Now here in Far Cry 6 there are 2 ways to play. Action mode is the more traditional way to play, where leveling up Danny and weapons is key to progression, or story mode. Story mode is basically easy mode. Headshots are headshots. If enemies are wearing heavy armor and helmets, a pistol and SMG won't take them out easy, but if you've got a sniper rifle, it's generally about 2 to 3 headshots to take out, say, super elite enemies. This also makes deadly areas more easy to move through. So hey, I tried this out and I went from the second area being, say, like level 6 to a level 9 area, and I didn't struggle at all. Now, Far Cry 6 does have different ammo types and weapon upgrades available for weapons. There's explosive rounds, which are effective against vehicles, heavy penetration rounds that work great against your mum and armoured enemies.
Just like your mum.
There's a heavy over there. That was actually pretty good.
Poison weapons, which will affect enemies and cause them to attack others. However, if you do play Far Cry 6 on story mode rather than action mode, you won't really need to worry about the ammo setup. Plus, on top of that, with the large variety of weapons here being standard, rebel crafted and Supremo backpack weapons, you have so many tools at your disposal, I honestly couldn't remember what weapon had special ammo types equipped. Again, if you've played Far Cry before, then you know exactly what you can expect here when it comes to enemies, but if you haven't and you're interested in starting here at 6, not only is it a great world, there's heaps of different enemies and animals here. There's standard goons, there's lieutenants that have more health, President Anton special forces, tanks, helicopters, planes, crocodiles, wolves, heavily armoured units, shotgun units, medics, snipers. There's loads of enemies going up against here, and thankfully there's so many ways to take them out. There are some funny gags here too in Far Cry that I found didn't also really make sense. Now, for starters, you can holster your weapons and walk around towns occupied by the President's forces. If you draw your weapon, you'll be told to put it away or they'll start attacking you. Now, if you start to get too close to government forces too, they'll get suspicious and they'll get ready to attack. However, your character is wearing a Supremo backpack, and my character in this instance was wearing a couple of spray-painted propane tanks on my back. Now, I don't know about you, but if I started walking down Melbourne CBD past some cops or military personnel with propane tanks strapped to my back, I don't think they'd let me just simply walk past.
What you got there?
Beanie Baby?
I found a couple of bugs here or there too. Now, for starters, when I revived an ally in-game. Now, for instance, an example, one mission I needed to carry a wounded ally while making my way through waves of enemies while another AI ally was with me. Now, the other AI ally went down and I needed to revive them. Now, the option came up so I didn't need to put the person I was carrying down to revive the downed other ally, right? But when I revived that ally, my fireman's carry just stopped and the body I was carrying teleported around a corner and down an alley. Now, you've probably already seen it in my video, and I did have some graphical issues with Far Cry 6. I played this on a 3070 with an Intel i9 and 32GB of RAM, and some textures here loaded as if it was a PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 3 game. I noticed this the first time I saw Guapo, and he didn't look like a gator, more like a giant smooth lizard. Characters' faces looked fantastic with so much emotion, only to be wearing a heavily pixelated Hawaiian shirt. Weapon models looked rough, speedometers inside vehicles were unreadable. I changed the graphics to low and slowly increased them, which fixed the issue and didn't at the same time. Graphics returned to normal, but then I would fast travel or I died and respawned, and some character models or textures would just go back to this styling. Also, during one mission I was in the back of a truck and my assault rifle textures were blurry, but when I changed from that weapon to another weapon and then back to my assault rifle, it looked perfect. I checked all of my drivers, everything was up to date, the game crashed multiple times and even caused me 2 blue screens. It crashed my Ubisoft Connect to the point where I had to uninstall Far Cry and uninstall Ubisoft Connect and then reinstall it. After uninstalling it the second time, I opted not to install the HD texture pack, which basically requires 11GB of VRAM even if you're not using it in the options menu, and I found I still had these cosmetic graphical issues. But I wasn't blue screening or crashing out at all after this though, so that's something to note. Now, when Far Cry 5 released well before I was even thinking about reviewing video games, I recall graphical issues like this when I played it on my Xbox and it was patched out. Now, I won't lie, the graphical issues had me running in circles for more than a day. Now, if my most popular video is anything to go by, we know that on launch there are some Ubisoft titles that have come out with some teething issues. But this game is definitely great and worth the wait to have that patch or update come out and fix the issue, and it probably won't be far long. Fuck, Ghost Recon Breakpoint didn't launch too well and I fucking love that game now. There's going to be a heap of DLC coming out for Far Cry 6 like we've had with previous Far Cry games, and from what we've been teased with so far, we'll have Danny Trejo and the return of previous Far Cry villains. With that personal annoyance for me being said, when I was in high action moments like taking on a helicopter with a light machine gun or holding off enemy forces while a psychotic chicken destroys a monument, I wasn't paying attention to how my gun graphics looked. I was having a blast. Also, if you've never finished a Far Cry game before, then you'll never know the pure satisfaction of clearing an enemy checkpoint by only using a bow and arrow. Sneaking up and popping enemies making you feel like Green Arrow or Hawkeye, but if you make some great hack trick shots with the bow and arrow during an alerted shootout, you'll feel like fucking Legolas. And taking out an enemy with a crossbow that fires harpoons is, yes, brutal. It's harder to use, but it's fucking worth it. All in all though, by far, Far Cry 6 is personally my favourite with the best setting, with a great variety of locations. Chorizo is an adorable, memorable companion that will be timeless now with the series, and Anton Castillo, holy shit, blows Pagan, Min, Jacobseed and Vars right out of the water. Yes, it's Giancarlo Esposito doing Gus Fring, but fuck, we can always do with more Gus Fring, right?
But what I do not understand is why we don't wash our hands before we pee.
Far Cry 6 is available now, and if you're a completionist, you'll be spending a heap of time on the island paradise of Yara.
I have caught a very big fish today. Haven't I, Diego? Diego!